starting a new one.
Okay.
Using this.
Yeah.
I don't think it sends me a whole new one.
Fours would have been...
Oh.
We'll have two parts to the planning scheme. Part 2.
Part 2 planning scheme. So that was 7.1, 7.1.2, the residential height limitations. And
Table for it as well.
Where's my mouse?
There it is.
And here's our table that we looked at. So 2 stories, maximum height of 8.5 meters. 7 meter bid.
Where's it gone?
Don't see it anywhere.
Is it gone? They're taking that away. Oh. Oh.
Then we're into simplification.
Wow. Oh, we were looking for where it says no habitable space above 7 meters, and it looks like they might have taken that away. It's not there?
Not in that part, we read all that.
Yeah.
No, this is
That's
7.1 density.
And it's not up the top of that?
And then we go.
It's height. Well, I never. They took it away. Still a good idea. I wonder why.
Don't know.
I guess they figure because nobody's ever done it and they've never had to say no to it, they might as well stop making it a rule.
Yeah.
So it's not a rule.
It's a Lisa rule.
But you can still do it.
For the reasons that you would have it, so as not to have people sleeping directly under the pitch of the roof that might be removed in cyclone, and that's where the heat air rises into, and it's really uncomfortable, so it's just a bad idea. It's not a rule anymore. I guess human nature.
But the 8.5 is definitely a rule, and the 2 stories is definitely a rule, so. Okay, 7.3, our next clause is building setbacks of residential buildings and ancillary structures. The purpose of this clause is to ensure residential buildings and ancillary structures. That would be your shed down the back there, Josh. Yeah. So that would be an ancillary structure, and they're compatible with the streetscape, surrounding development, residential buildings on the same site. And it's to minimise the adverse effects of building massing when viewed from adjoining land and from the street, and as to avoid undue overlooking from adjoining properties, and to encourage breeze penetration through and between buildings. Point 2, is in this clause, an ancillary structure includes a carport, garage, pergola, portico, shed, shade sail. I may or may not include external walls. Very clear, may or may not. I don't think any of the rest of this applies to us in a residential building, so I'm not going to go through all of that. Oh, sorry, 4. Subject clause 7.4, residential buildings and ancillary structures are to be set back from lot boundaries in accordance with table A, B or C. No part of the roof structure, including gutters and eaves, is to encroach more than 0.9 meters into the minimum building setbacks from the lot boundaries. So when we talk about setbacks, they are measured from where the roof overhang is. So no part of the roof structure is allowed to encroach more than 0.9 of a meter. And where the lot boundary is with a public street from which vehicular access to the lot is prohibited, this boundary shall be considered the side or rear lot boundary. So if you've got a site that's on a corner, and you've got so we always have a primary boundary, so we always say that's the boundary facing the street, which is fine if you've only got one boundary onto the street, but if you've got a corner lot, you might have 2 streets as boundaries. So what it's saying is that wherever your vehicle access to the lot is prohibited, that boundary shall be regarded as a side or a rear boundary. So wherever your vehicle access to the site is your primary boundary, and anything else is regarded as a side or rear boundary. It's an important little note there. So let's look at how the table is laid out. So the table A to clause 7.3, minimum setbacks for 1- and 2-story residential buildings and structures in zones other than CB and all of the rest of them there. I'm not going to read them all out. So that does mean us. It doesn't mean SD is not mentioned there, so this is our table. So in an SD zoned lot, the primary street frontage for 1- and 2-story buildings, the setbacks are, so what the primary street frontage onto the street. So 6 metre for residential building and ancillary structures with external walls, and 4.5 metres for verandas, balconies and ancillary structures without external walls. Ancillary just means, it means like supporting. Let me see, like a shed would be an ancillary to a house, because the shed doesn't stand alone, if you know what I mean. It's storage for the occupants of the house. So ancillary just means something that supports or is part of the intention or the main building on the site.
So
ancillary too.
4.5, that's from the front boundary to the post on the veranda.
To the elevation, yep, to the post.
To the post on the veranda.
And then but you're allowed to have the 900 mil
Yes.
overhanging.
Spot on, Paul. Perfect.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture that house that's the existing one that's there.
But 6 metres back from that primary boundary to the front wall of the dwelling house, the enclosed areas. And then for the secondary street, for 1 and 2 story buildings, which they've just told us that we're going to be considering it as a side or a rear boundary up here. But if we did have a secondary street, the side street,
So not typical.
you would have, the setback would be 2.5 metres for the residential building and 1.5 for verandas, balconies or other ancillary structures. And again, 0.9 metres for shade cells to a maximum height of 2.5. So you can have a shade cell at the side of your house, to the side or rear boundary, or to a secondary street that comes right up to 900 millimetres from your boundary line, provided it does have a maximum height of 2.5 metres. So a lot of people use that clause there to put shade cell over their swimming pool. And then for your side and rear boundaries, it's 1.5 metres including ancillary structures, or 1 metre, provided that the subject wall only includes openings that are either glazed in an opaque material and cannot be opened, or have a sill height of 1.6 metres or greater.
That's new.
Yeah.
So does that mean that they?
Oh, so you can go closer if you... What?
Sorry?
Would you interpret that as they can be opened if they're over 1.6?
Yes. I would. However, I've a bit of an issue with that with the BCA. I'm going to come back to that in a minute.
It's new.
It is new. So the subject wall does not extend beyond a maximum height of 3.5 metres and does not extend beyond a maximum length of 9 metres. So you can build right up to 1 metre from your side and rear boundaries.
There's a lot more implications to that, Senator just said, with the NCC. So we're talking about fire separation. If you get too close to the neighbours, you have to have fire-resisting construction, because you don't want fire from one lot travelling to the other. And the one that is more to do with the planning scheme is about inundation. So if we don't have gutters, which aren't mandatory in Class 1 and 10 buildings, if you don't have any guttering on your house and it rains as heavily as it does here, the water coming off your roof is going to be so close to the neighbours that it'll end up going over the fence and onto their yard, which is also prohibited. So you'd have to make sure that you had guttering if you were going to get that close to the boundary, and it would also have to be fireproof for the NCC.
Tell somebody about all these new houses we're building then. They put big houses on tiny little 400 blocks.
Well, if it's got guttering and it's fireproof, it's okay, but it's probably not the best acoustics.
No.
There's just a concession to let you go a little closer. So that's new.
So that wall is only includes openings that are either glazed or opaque material.
Openings are windows and doors. So it's basically about clear glass. They don't want people being able to overlook and see in and out. So they want privacy mandated. So they're saying you can go closer, but you've got to have glazed or opaque material. So it can't be see-through.
Yeah, the glaze is not glazing, but glaze.
Yeah, not glazing is in windows. Glaze is in, you can't really see through it. You could probably make out the silhouette of a person at best. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned with the part about or have a sill height of 1.6 meters or greater, and that if you did have a window at 1.6 meters high and higher, that you would be able to open it, because obviously if you left that window opened, that wall is not a firewall then. It's got an opening in it, so yeah, that wouldn't comply with it complies with the planning, but it wouldn't comply with the NCC fire regulations and separation distances.
Technically, the fire thing doesn't kick in until 900 millimetres away from the boundary, so they've given themselves a whole 100 millimetres of fire safety. Doesn't seem like enough, but it's compliant. Just, yeah. I don't think the fire
That's quite new. That was a surprise for me today. That's very new.
They keep stretching how much you can build on the block. When I first started designing, this front one was 7 metres, 7.5 metres. So it keeps getting less and less and less.
Yeah.
Look at the ones on at Lions on the way to the hospital. They're not even set 4 metres off the road or something, are they?
I don't know.
What's the street that runs from Casuarina down towards the hospital?
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Yeah, those ones there behind.
Yeah, I know the ones you mean. So Breezes Muirhead has its own covenants, design guidelines, but I don't think they are narrower than this.
In lines, those ones in lines, they're really close to the to the road, those couple there.
They might have done a special job lot application or something.
Yeah.
They may have, yeah. So you can, so the idea of the planning scheme is that if you do comply with all of these clauses that we've just read out, then you don't need to apply for planning. You don't need to make an application for planning consent. If you don't comply with them, then you do need to make an application for consent, and you may be granted that application for consent. So perhaps those houses you're referring to went through that process.
If everybody got this sketch down, it can be really helpful to see a picture of these setbacks in your notes when you come back to it.
So obviously when you're designing in this design phase and you've got your site plan, you really want to be taking a note of these setbacks on your site plan. Sketch them on there, write the dimensions beside them, so where on that site we could actually locate this dwelling.
Can I rub this out now? I just want to do
Some
exactly
people are
that.
still...
Because we're going to do it on our site plan. So you'll get it twice.
You're all right there, Lisa. You look like a ballet dancer.
What is it in the picture in picture called? Never rub out this way. Josh? Is that what they teach you? It's up and down. Yeah, don't wiggle your butt. That side. All right, can you bring the smart plan up?
Sure can.
Back to our site plan of our project. There's no part of the brief that says they want to have the building as far forward as they can, but there was a bit of information in there about being able to access an entertainment type area from a covered entertainment area. That was quite a part of the brief, wasn't it? You could see that they were trying to get maximum yield out of the site for leisure and not waste any space, perhaps back here. This is the back of the building, if you like. It's where the bathroom will be, it's perhaps where the back stairs will go, and it's perhaps where all the plumbing and things will sit. You don't necessarily need a lot of space back there. So the 1.5 meters that we have might be more than we need. So I'm predicting that perhaps the client might appreciate a setback waiver that gives them more space here and less space here. Now, I wouldn't normally advise a ground level building to go closer to the fence than 1.5 meters because you need to be able to go around your whole building. So not just in the case of an emergency, but just for practicalities, moving from the front of the house to the back of the house, you don't want to have to go all the way around if you just want to be on one side. Access is a bit more restricted if it's too narrow, but this house is on stilts. It's up high on columns. So you already have access to that whole section of the land, don't you? It's not restricted by walls. So we could perhaps go a little bit closer. Now, I don't want to get too carried away with how close yet, but perhaps mark on here that 1.5 meters might be a little further in for now. I'm suggesting that perhaps we might like to just bring our proposed dwelling a little closer to the boundary. That will then trigger a Development Consent Authority application, which we won't necessarily do because that's a different project for another day. But it gives us some extra meaning to our brief, our project.
So you say go as far as you can.
I don't know how far we can go yet because the National Construction Code is going to determine that with regards to fire safety, but I have a feeling we can go a little closer.
So you want to do 1 metre.
So 1.5 metres will be further away than the building is. I'm saying bring the building closer to the boundary. Let's make it interesting. We want to maximise the amount of space they've got on this side of the building, and we don't want to waste any space here. And 1.5 metres is excessive considering it's up off the ground. So we want to get a little bit closer. So we're going to have a bit of a look at that later. Just bookmark that for now. But what about the distance here? What sort of dimension do you think? That was the wonkiest line I've ever drawn. What sort of a dimension do you think? Now we can go as close as 6 metres, but do we want to go that close? I'm just thinking about if this is the kind of family that is going to have a caravan or a trailer or a boat or something. I'm just thinking the tropical lifestyle goes with a brief like this, the requirement to maintain old school tropical architecture, use passive cooling. They seem like the kind of people who would have a boat and go camping. Kind of just goes together. What do you think?
Well, you could also increase the veranda. You take your veranda can start at 4.5.
Yeah, there's a small veranda on the brief. I think it's about there, and then there's the stairs, and then there'll be a set of stairs back here on the proposed drawing, but there's no external veranda as such, just in this instance. But you're right, that could go closer. Does anybody want to have just a random figure they think would be a good one to be able to store stuff on the drive? So the cars are under here, but if you just want, and it'll probably end up being, where's our road? It'll end up being, whoops, nope.
As an example, my ute is 5.5. So if you add the trailer on as a 1.8.
Length. What about a boat? How long's a boat?
4.25.
4.2, that's very precise. 4 or 5 metres?
Well, I've got a 4.2.
And then, other things.
15 minutes.
Yeah, but you're not going to park it.
Nice round, easy 10. What do you think?
Not going to park a long way, are you?
The boat goes here. Is that where the boat goes?
So you want, the boat's 5 metres, and you got 900 to a metre drawbar.
Yeah.
So you want at least 6 metres for your boat. That's what I'm saying. My ute is 5.5, and you don't want to have to try and climb over the top of it to close the gate.
True.
So you need
Or a caravan.
minimum 6 metres.
So is 10 okay? I'm voting for 10.
Yeah.
Yay or nay? What do you think, Sandra? 10 metres? Yeah. So it's quite compliant. We only needed 6, didn't we? Yeah. So I'm thinking 10. Make a note on the plan. So you want a line perhaps this way, or you can simply just do a dimension to show the dimension between here and here. Then add on, we've got the back setback. 1.5 metres. And we've got this sewer easement, which we can't build on anyway, which is twice as wide as the side setback. But make a note on there as well, just so we don't forget. So, I don't know if you can see it very well. I just made a little, I'll do it in black. I just made a little adjustment on my driveway here. So I've doubled the width of the driveway, because you don't want just a single driveway for a double carport. That seems a bit silly. So I've increased the size of my driveway. But what I need to do is shrink it down. So here is the edge of my lot, and here is the other side of Rapid Creek Road. And this is all creek and what have you. There's a curb there. But what you can't see is the difference between the boundary and the edge of the bitumen that you ride on, that you drive on. And this bit here is council verge. It varies quite a bit. There's no rule about how wide a council verge is. You can't stand on a road and look at a vacant block of land and guess where your boundary line is. There are the odd few surveys that will give you a little bit of an indication sometimes of where the curb edge is, but it's very rare.
If you dig a hole and put a fence post, they'll come and tell you. And I said, well, how come the telecom cable is in my yard then?
You might have an easement for that.
Yeah, well, I had a dispute.
You're a real problem, aren't you, Paul? You found all these curly things. So what I'm suggesting is that the crossover has a maximum width of 3 metres. The council don't want you having a double driveway on their verge. So you just have to bring your 6 metres back to 3 on your property before you cross the boundary line with your concrete crossover on the council land. And they like it to be concrete, just straight concrete. No fancy. So perhaps update your site plan to show a wider driveway, but that comes back to 3 metres on a crossover. You don't have to worry too much about the crossover, just the 3 metres, yep.
It's not called a verge?
Council verge. So the concrete itself is called a crossover because it's where the residents cross from their boundary to the roadway. So you're crossing over council land, which is called the council verge. Here where I wrote it upside down. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
Did I say that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Get back out of the way now.
But there's no reason we can't make that a rectangular 6 by 10 concrete area.
It's awfully hot. That's a lot of heat. I wouldn't recommend it. If you don't shape it back, you'll end up with squared off, and it's hard to, you'll end up, it's kind of wasted concrete. You'll never use it, but you could. And for a passive cooling, the less heat bank, the better.
Remember your client said they want a passively cooled house, so
Yeah, they'll be drawing in hot
less
air off
is
that
more
concrete. Yeah.
with concrete.
Gravel's good.
Gravel has a
Grass
benefit that you can filtrate your stormwater through the gravel, so it's not impermeable. However, it gives you it stores just as much radiant heat, or reflects just as much radiant heat as concrete would. And the darker the colour, the worse that will be. Yeah.
If we're going for the eco thing, you wouldn't put that extra 3 by 6 to the concrete there. You put those pavers that the grass grows through or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
strips
absolutely.
with the tyres and
Great
have the grass.
solution. Yeah.
And
Yep.
if you're looking at heat and all that, we've already lost a third of that.
Put that on your site plan. Sorry, go back to you.
Back here. Trying to see him here. Okay.
So, just to get it straight, we're using the existing plans and everything of this house built, and then we're modifying them for this job
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
again. So it's
You get everything.
it's a brand new setup.
You get everything from the bearers up when you buy the transportable house.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, we're not building the existing one that's already at 67. We're building an imaginary new one, different styling and everything. Is that the case?
So the property, the actual real property on 67 Racappa Creek Road was one of these houses.
Yeah.
And they've reclad it
Yeah.
and added some extra bits on.
Yeah, but we're not doing their project, we're doing our own project. That's what I'm getting at.
It's our project, yes, but it's very similar.
Slightly different. to
Slightly different,
What they've actually got on site that are not.
correct. It's very similar, yeah.
Just checking these other tables.
Yeah.
Make sure we.
Lots of different types of setbacks for lots of different types of zones. So in the rural area where the blocks of land are much larger, the setbacks are much larger in accordance.
So our next clause was 7.5, and this is to do with private open space. And this is the final clause of the planning scheme that we're going to look at, because there was only 4 clauses listed in the zoning table. So the purpose of this clause is to ensure that each dwelling has a private open space that is of adequate size to provide for domestic purposes, appropriately sited, permeable, so can't be paved area, can't be part of your concrete, and open to the sky, and that's so that you can plant some trees there. And is inclusive of areas of deep soil for shade tree planting. Private open space should satisfy the minimum area and dimensions contained in this table and be directly accessible from the dwelling and enable the extension of the function of the dwelling. So that indoor-outdoor living that we're used to in Darwin, that's what it's encouraging here. And so again, they're repeating it should be permeable and open to the sky. So private open space on lots less than 600 metres squared should be sufficiently permeable to allow stormwater infiltration and lessen stormwater from the site, so be permeable. Include at least one area of approximately 5 metres squared for the deep soil planting of shade trees, and allow for landscaping at the property frontage to complement the visual amenity of the streetscape. So what's our lot size on this one?
900, 800, something.
950.
So we're not in this one, it's not less than 600 metres squared, so the number 1 would be applying to us.
So they're not talking about space on the house, they're talking about the lawn area, aren't they?
Yeah, external area, private open space.
Open to the sky.
Yeah, good point. And whether we're private open space is at ground level other than for a single dwelling, well that's not us because we are a single dwelling, so we won't bother going into that one. The location of the private open space should take into account views from the site, the natural features of the site and the location of any private open space or habitable room associated with the neighbouring dwellings. So we're trying to make our private open space as private as possible, funnily enough. So we want to kind of figure out what the neighbours are doing, and do we really want the neighbours' living room or balcony looking out over our swimming pool and our private open space? Well, not if we can help it at all. Not always possible, but we do. The planning scheme does encourage us to try and have some privacy in that space. And then if a dwelling is within a multiple dwelling, ours isn't, so we're going to skip that bit. And the consent authority may approve an application for multiple dwelling. Again, that's not of concern to us. So this is our table. Single dwellings on lots of less than 600 metres squared. They need 50 metres squared of private open space. This is exclusive of driveways and parking areas, but inclusive of an area with dimensions of 6 by 6.
Minimum dimensions.
Minimum dimensions of 6 by 6, sorry.
Because obviously 6 6s are only 30.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be bigger than that. The idea is they don't want you to have a 50 metre long, 1 metre wide private open space. That's not really very practical, except for perhaps cricket.
However, given that our lot is greater than 600 metres squared, this clause actually doesn't really apply to us because we're assuming that because of our large lot size, we will have adequate private open space anyway. But this clause is in there for lots that are less than 600 metres squared, where the possibility is that you could completely concrete the whole site, and you're not allowed to do that in accordance with the
So there's
planning
no
scheme.
drawing in there for over 600 square metre lots?
No, there isn't.
Because there's a lot of Greek places around, obviously they're over 600 square, being the older Darwin,
Mhm.
and they have concrete.
Yeah, I walk past lots of houses that have concrete the entire yard all the time, and I wonder about that.
Saves
Yeah.
buying a lawnmower.
Sorry?
Saves buying a lawnmower.
Saves buying a lawnmower, saves doing any gardening. But as a rule, I would ensure that all of my lots had a minimum of 50 metres squared private open space, even though the planning scheme doesn't insist that you address that clause for your private open space for lots over 600 metres squared. I would always draw it on.
So that's why, on these 400 square metre blocks, they've got that little green space there,
Hmm
6 by 6, and that's all they have to have.
It's not 6 by 6, it's a minimum of 6 by 6.
hmm
So one side has to be greater to achieve 50 square metres. You are allowed to use a little bit of the veranda sometimes, but they're going away from that as much as they can because they want it to be able to be planted out and shady and grass.
So 6 by 6 is 36 metres squared, but you have to have a minimum of 50. So the 6 by 6 is a minimum. You have to have 6 metres on a minimum of that shape. So you can understand it's not always a square, you know. It's,
Yeah, you can use the
yeah,
easement.
yeah, but it
You can
can't
use the
be
easement,
it can't be
kind of-
50 metres long and 1 metre wide. That's what they're saying. You need
So
a
as long as
minimum.
they've got that little bit of green space somewhere, either the front or the back,
Mhm.
on their block, then they can run right out to 1.5 all the way to the other boundaries then, to the other side.
I don't see planning agreeing to put your private open space on the front setback because they typically don't allow fences in the front of developments like that anymore. So there's no security for your kids or anything. It's not like you can let them play unsupervised out there. Mm.
Right. So they catch you.
Yeah.
No chance.
Yeah, they want the fence, design guidelines for a lot of greenfield developments now have the front fence set 1.5 metres back from the front corner of the boundary, of the house. It's a huge amount of space given over to community friendliness.
So the minimum requirement used to be, sorry,
Yeah.
the minimum requirement used to be 1.8, wasn't it, for the boundary, from the side?
Yeah, it used to be at one point. Yeah.
So
I don't
now,
know.
So some it depends on the on the building type. Yeah.
yeah, so just normally, so
Yeah.
now it's 1.5.
Yes. And we've just read today that in some instances it can be down as far as 1. Yep. So those are all the things to do with the planning scheme that you need to allow for in your preliminary design. Okay, so remember we're still at the very preliminary design stage. We're just having a look at the site. We're doing a site analysis, and those are the conditions on the planning scheme. But it is important at the beginning of the design phase that you do have a look at the planning scheme and see, well, what is going to apply to me here. You don't want to find out that you've done a design and then come to 80% design and realise that you need to move the house. Yeah. Happens.
It's easier to move it
happens.
on paper than it is to move
It
it in
is.
concrete, isn't it?
It is. But it's easier to move it at 20% design than it is at 80% design.
It changes so many other things, doesn't it?
Yes, has implications for everything. Okay. We are on to NCC for our last part of the day.
How is everybody's brains? How are you all doing? If I was to prattle on now about the structure of the NCC, how much would you remember? I'll give you just none. I'm just trying to gauge whether to
Yeah,
do it.
do it fresh in the morning.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. The triangle.
So you probably already Googled and found the Development Consent Authority website. So remember I said earlier, ignore the banner Lands and Planning. Now it's called the Department of Infrastructure Planning and Logistics.
Dipple.
It's that.
Dipple. It's the short.
It used to
first.
be Dippy, now it's Dipple, and the next change of government will change it to something.
Oh,
different.
every time we get a new government, they change the name of this department. I don't know what it is they don't like about this name of this department, but they change it all the time. So,
Now, we've already talked quite a bit about how the government departments work under the Building Act and the Planning Act. So these guys will be under the Planning Act. I'm just going to go back. See the breadcrumbs here? So we're in Development Consent Authority, comes back a section to boards and then land and planning. I'm just going to go back a step. Let's have a quick look at that. Just looking around mostly at the
I'm
moment.
just going to have a look at this website.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of information, and this is what we were alluding to last week. There's all sorts of information. There's a planning scheme. Pool fencing's a big one. Flood mitigation, which actually, now I think about it, is an extra clause for us.
Oh, yeah, we should
I better
have it.
go back to that very quickly.
Yeah, okay.
We
can
do have
cover
an
that.
extra clause we have to take care of. It's clause 6.4. It's special for flood inundation.
So we should look at that map for the flood inundation.
Yeah. Oops, too far. Down. What ratios? No, 7.4. My mistake. Never worked with children and animals. No, something. Oh, what is it? 6.4.1? That's my last guess, then I'm checking.
No,
It's not that either?
no.
Damn. What is it?
Yeah,
I'm going to have
on
to
this.
look it up. Land sub 6.14. I was so close. Damn. Land subject to flooding and storm surge. We are, in fact, subject to flooding and storm surge at 67 Raspberry Creek Road.
So can everyone add this to their list of clauses that they need to comply with for this particular site? It says 6.14.
6.14, yeah.
6.14.
Yeah.
14.
Yeah,
6.14.
6.14, yeah.
I couldn't find it. I put it for 1.4.
So the clause is to reduce risk to people, damage to property and costs to the general community caused by flooding and storm surge. It doesn't apply to carports, garages, garden sheds, gazebos, pergolas and extensions to existing dwellings and extensions to existing commercial or industrial buildings. It's mostly more about where people live. There's a whole bunch of definitions there, which we'll come back to if we need. I'm hoping, did you say there was a map?
Yeah, but it won't be in this part.
No.
There are flood inundation maps.
Let's have a look and see if
Oh, I
can
don't
find it.
know.
We just had that, where was it?
Going to flood
Flood
mitigation.
mitigation, it might be in there. I'm just looking to see if we can see the flood inundation map, because
Yeah,
there's a
in the
primary and
region.
secondary storm surge area.
Yeah, there should be one from Rapid Creek
I
on
think so.
there. Yeah,
There
Rapid
it
Creek,
is.
first one, fantastic. Oh,
Flooding
no
can
map.
occur in the Rapid Creek catchment when heavy rain combines with high tides to cause flood water to back up to the creek and flood low-lying properties. There's just some information about recent cyclones, there was quite a few properties, 67 properties were impacted. That's Narara.
That page you're on there.
Yeah.
Where's that?
It's on the infrastructure planning and logistics page, from home to lands and planning to flood mitigation.
Okay.
I'm just looking to see if there's a storm surge map.
There definitely is one. Oh, yeah, so
No, it's just a mitigation report.
if you search the site and just go for flood map, Rapid Creek maybe.
There we go. Greater Darwin, Bino, Cox, Peninsula, Darwin, Dundas, Armstrong, Goodell.
It's got to be Darwin.
Yep. Oh. Won't open. See if it'll open for you.
Let's go into that Darwin area one there.
Yeah. Yeah. I might just save first and then open, see how that works. Oh dear. It's broken. And I just used to have some. Did used to have some storm surge information. Oh, I'll do a quick search. And we'll come back to it. I don't think there's any maps in the report. Did you find any? Cool.
That's what I got.
Quite what I'm looking for.
Is this right? Yeah.
If you click on that, does it bring you into there now? No.
Yeah.
No. No, that I know that report. No, there's a whole map that actually shows. It actually shows where the storm surge crosses across particular lots, and sometimes half your lot could be in the storm surge area and half not. Yes, that's looking a lot much better.
But there's no lot numbers.
No, you just have to figure out where your lot is. So, what have you got your pink line?
It's a very old map.
So where did you get that?
Oh, where did I get that? I just went to that website. Environmental.
So Environmental Natural Resources website is where the storm surge maps are. Good on you. Oh.
I went to actually that one that search storm surge.
Am I in the right place?
No, that's
It's
Secure NT.
probably a good diagram of what we're talking about, the phenomenon. So this is a normal low tide, mid tide or high tide hitting the edge of the coastline, and then this is the extra bit that you get if there's a storm surge from a storm tide. So you've got a high tide plus the storm tide on top of it, which is what causes the inundation. Not to mention just the sheer amount of rain and how it all, Sandra was talking earlier about the collection of stormwater now is all coming towards Rapid Creek. So the drainage system that takes it away just can't cope under those kinds of conditions. So it's the king tide or high tide, storm surge plus just inundation. And it usually goes over the whole traffic lights area there that crosses Rapid Creek and Trail Road. It's usually completely covered in a deep storm.
To me? No, it's not really.
Here we go, storm surge map. Finally I got there.
Oh yeah, we're there. Yeah.
It was where I was before, wasn't it? I think I've been here before.
And then if you click
But
on
it
the
wouldn't
Darwin
open. So I was
area,
clicking on these links and
yeah,
it wouldn't
no,
open.
click that Darwin area.
This one?
No, the Darwin area where you were there before. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's try open now. Ah.
I don't know why.
Yeah, no,
Anyway,
we've got
this
it
is an
open
old
here,
one.
but
If you have some success,
yeah.
do it for yourself. But just be aware, there's quite a few areas. So this is, like I said, quite old. Doesn't show much of Palmerston. That's the airport, this big square blank piece is the RAF base and the airport. That's Palmerston down here. And you can see all the mangroves and things. This is all flood zone. And around the waterfront, Larrakia. And then all in the Rapid Creek zone. And then, what's that area there? The next creek over. Oh no, that's Rapid Creek there. That's Bagot Road.
Here.
There's lots. It keeps getting updated quite a bit because the phenomenon changes. We'll just go back very quickly to the clause. So in the clause, there's different phrases. So flood level means water level associated with a 1% AEP flood event, an annual exceedance probability. And where the level can't be determined, it's determined by the controller of water resources within the Water Act.
Here or here, so we're in that.
So it's about the likelihood, the probability. A DFE is a defined flood event. So in an area subject to a floodplain management plan, that defines a flood event is specified in that plan, or if there's no floodplain management plan, it defines a flood event for an area that's in the 1% AEP flood event.
This one's for Rasta.
Don't know.
Let's put a whole bunch of land in the middle of the airport now,
Mm.
raise the spot over the airport,
Yeah.
instead of affecting the water running off to other areas. They just do a calculation, and so like every time we change anything anywhere,
Yeah, they probably update it fairly regularly. Probably not immediately. Don't know. So in a defined flood area, the storage or disposal of environmentally hazardous industrial material and the development of fuel depots is avoided.
Water's gone.
It's a bad idea.
I said Tipperary water's gone.
Yeah, Tipperary water's inundated. The minimum floor level of habitable rooms should be 300 millimetres above the flood level for the site.
You say the
So make a note of that. Habitable rooms. Now, we are not proposing to have any habitable rooms on the ground floor. The laundry is not habitable. It's a wet area, but you don't sleep or have living area in there. It's not a place that you'll habitate. Is that a word? So we don't really have to worry. We're automatically compliant. We've got everything 3 metres above natural ground level, which is plenty. But just make a note anyway.
Sorry, I'm just
Okay.
going to say something here 1 second.
And using fill to achieve floor levels should be avoided. Fill is dirt that you bring in from somewhere else and put in place and then stamp it down as hard as you possibly can, but it's never the same as original dirt. It's never as stable as original dirt. So if it was to be inundated with water, it would probably get carried away, and anything that was built on top of it probably would go with it. Did you get an email?
Yeah.
Put a little note, clause 6.14, no habitable rooms within 300 millimetres of the flood zone. Tech savvy over here. Well done.
It didn't work the way I wanted to. Now I'm happy.
Yep.
So where are we? Okay, losing myself on this one. Jubilee. Okay, so our site is this one, I think. Is that right? Is that one?
is that right?
Mm.
Yeah.
So we're in the
Have a light
light
blue.
blue. Let's have a look at light blue. We can find the index somewhere.
I'm sure it's nothing higher in that area.
A little bit.
That's not telling us anything.
It doesn't mean that the insurance premiums are higher within that area?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, it would be.
If you had a house in that area where you did have habitable rooms that were built in the storm surge area, but if you build an elevated house and it doesn't have any habitable rooms that can be flooded, what your insurance risk shouldn't be any higher.
My friend,
Queensland storms after
Mhm.
we were the third highest house in Rockhampton, other than the ones that were up on the mountain. And our premiums went up, and yeah, they pretty much proved that if we got flooded, the rest of Queensland had been taken away.
Yeah.
They didn't care.
Wow.
Rockhampton was now a flood zone.
Oh my goodness.
Up there premiums went up.
Wow.
Mm.
My place is in Rockhampton, and we're nowhere near, like, we get a creek, but we're nowhere near the flood. And I think on our unit,
Are the colours on a different page?
the premium went up to
I think they are on that right hand side. You're on the right track.
It's unbelievable.
Right at the top. Right at the top there. In colours. Yeah,
And
there.
there's only
That's
two
the,
insurance companies
the primary storage search now.
Mhm.
go to give their premium.
So the colour on the map, we were this light blue colour, and so what that's telling us is that we should expect a storm surge to inundate this land. It's called a 1 in 100 year event, so once every 100 years. As you can
Compared to the secondary every 1,000 years.
1,000
very
years.
often.
Yes, it is. It's pretty regular. 1 in 100 years. It sounds like a long time, but we can expect that to be flooding, especially in Darwin, where that 1 in 100 year event is probably going to happen more regularly, given the effects of climate change are having all over the world. These 1 in 100 year events that we used to consider should only happen 1 in 100 years are starting to happen once every decade in a lot of places across the world. So we do need to design for them in mind. The secondary one then is the 1 in 1,000 year, so less likely to occur.
That ARI, I think, average rainfall index or indice or something like that. All right, you right?
Yep.
Yep. Just gonna look that up.
Yep.
So where were we?
Back to the clause.
Yep.
That's in the PDF there. Shall we?
Yeah, no, of course it's okay. Well done. Oh, no. All right. So what I want to now look for is, if it still comes up. Applications and processes. So that flow chart that Sandra described earlier is an image-based version of this site. So it used to be a separate website for the government, but they've integrated it into the same format, but it's still called the Development One-Stop Shop. So the meeting with the planner, discussing with the planner, putting in the application, filling out the forms, getting your signs, that sort of stuff, it all happens in one location. It recently moved to Energy House in Kavanagh Street. It used to be in on the corner of Nucky and Kavanagh Street, and then it went out to Parap, and now it's back into the CBD, so it keeps moving around, but it's all those parts of the statutory and regulatory planners are all in one place. So the idea is that you can take your application form in there and lodge it all in one location. So there's a bit of a flow here, meet with the planner, put in your application. What would happen if you just didn't need a whole new application, you just needed a variation because it wasn't a huge change to the permit? How to review planning decisions, how to apply for an amendment to the planning scheme, what happens if there are concurrent applications, which I think we've got here, this pink and yellow sign, any exceptions to development permits, any alteration of permits, what happens if you've got an abandoned property, if you've got an interim development control order, which is a whole other mechanism, probably not necessary to worry about too much, but worth reading later. And then advertising requirements. So these pink signs are part of the advertising requirements, but it also goes into the NT News. If you've ever been flicking through the classifieds and seeing images and survey drawings and lots and different things, that's the advertising of this process. And then apply for low-risk certification of compliance. So that's where you can go in and ask for a special permit.
You should look at a current development application.
Yeah,
I think if you go into development applications.
Where is it?
I think if you go into development applications.
This one here?
Yeah.
It's in there? Could be right. I think this is what we want here, online services and fees.
Mm-hmm.
We want the link to the other part, don't we? Nope, going back in circles. Here are some of the fees. So they're not as expensive as you might think. It costs more to do it than to actually do the application. So if you've got a development application for a single dwelling on one lot, it's $213. So it's not very expensive, the actual application fee. Drawing all the plans, going through the design process, waiting, that sort of stuff, much more expensive. But the actual application is not too bad. And then obviously it's tiered depending on the size of the project. So the more expensive it gets, the more expensive the application gets. But even then, it's not unreasonable.
And you've got advertising fees.
Yeah, you do have to pay a little bit extra. There's some standard ones for if you want to subdivide or consolidate, realign boundaries, variations which are a bit different. That's where you've got a permit and you're not changing it a great deal, so you just pay a percentage. Amending the planning scheme costs really a lot. And I'll just click here on There's advertising costs. I'll just click there and you can have a bit of a look. It's not too bad. So for a development application, $339. So that pays for the ads in the paper and for the pink sign and the advertising on the website, which is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. If you just search current applications, it should bring it. That's what we're trying to get into at the minute. Yeah.
Because I remember I was looking for it, but I couldn't find it.
It's definitely in here, and it's definitely something that everyone in publicly should go.
Development applications online website. There it was. Development applications online website. So it opens on a separate link.
Oh, we might be able to log in. Just try to hit that login.
Stop, really?
Yeah, I set one up last year. I have no idea. Now they've changed my password on me.
Okay, I was going to say, I never get that. So this is where you go to create, and Sandra will know more about this, so I'll let you take over if you like. But
yeah, sure. So once you create a login here, so you can set up an account for yourself in here, and this is where you will lodge a planning application in this section of the website. So it goes through preliminary information that it wants, like the site address and area and description of your development and all of those preliminary things, the name of your client, sort of the information that goes on the pink sign, and then you upload the documents. So there's two sort of parts to your documentation for planning applications. One is a report, which is called a statement of effect. The statement of effect is a document which outlines pretty much everything we did today. So it outlines what the zone is, what your use is, what clauses you have to comply with. And then when you go in there, or when you're compiling your statement of effect, you need to state the clause and then respond to the clause. How does your development comply with that clause? So if it's something simple like clause, I never remember, 6.5.1, the car parks, I usually draw a little table in my report and I'll say required number of car parks 2, provided number of car parks 2, and then you go forward from there. So that's the statement of effect only becomes complex when you've got a clause that you're non-compliant with. And then you have to go further and explain why you're non-compliant and give the reasons for that, because obviously this is your method of putting your argument for why you should be non-compliant, why that should be permitted. This is your report, your statement of effect that you're going to give to the planner to argue your point. And then, of course, the second part is your documentation. And there is a minimum amount of documentation that you can go into view proposal and it will show you all those ones. This is a single dwelling. Brilliant.
Somebody's got an application currently under advertising. So if we went to this address, there would be a sign, a pink sign up on the boundary fence. And you can see the proposal. It says here, view proposal. If we had something to say, we would click the make submission portal, but we don't. So we're just going to let that be. So, alterations and no jokes in business. Yeah. Alterations and additions: carport, portico, and shed to an existing single dwelling with reduced front, side, and rear setback.
Woo!
That's a big ask. All three. Let's see what they have to say for themselves. Pardon?
Oh, you can download all the documents now. You can see exactly.
It's public knowledge.
This is So this is where your drawings will go. So if you drew drawings for someone for a planning application,
that's a big shed.
Your drawings are going to sit up live on this website.
Is this in the application?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got a site set out drawing.
Oh, this is tough.
That was left over from booklet. Oh dear. Oh, Darren. Don't. I know that drafter, that's naughty. He knows better. It's always a bit yuck with PDFs. They always look worse from a distance. What I'm annoyed with is it's not immediately obvious which bit is being applied for and which bit isn't. Now it's clear this is too close to the boundary, so that's obviously an issue there. But is this an issue as well? Is this an issue? Like, I can't tell, there's so many dimensions. So clarity of drawings is a bit of an issue there. Never mind. See if we can find. Pardon?
Looks like an easement, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it might be. That's an unfortunate
That's a terribly unfortunate easement.
Isn't it?
And this is probably why he may get consent for all these reduced setbacks, because it's
Because
a
it's
difficult
right in the
site to
middle.
build on
Yep.
with the easements the way it is.
Oh, I'm not happy. It's not letting me open anything.
I imagine if you right click and open with other and open with Bluebeam,
Yeah,
it worked
I
for
will.
me a minute ago.
Yeah, I thought that was good.
I haven't given you the option though, is it?
No, no, that's not to worry. I won't waste any time. This is the statement of effect will open.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's have a bit of a look. So this is the document that goes with it. They call it a statement of effect. So a bit of information on the front. Proposed additions to an existing single dwelling with a reduced front setback, so for the carport, and the reduced side and rear setbacks for the shed. So a little bit more information there than we already had. Information about the application itself, the property
Zoning,
and the zoning.
zoning table there to show where it is,
Yeah.
what zone it's
So
in.
that's a screenshot of our NR Maps database. The proposal, and then here are the clauses they're addressing. So 6.5.1, parking requirements, proposal provides 2 minimum car park spaces, complies. And they've actually provided 3 by the looks of things. Parking layout, so he's gone into a bit of detail here, and it's, yeah, it's not always true that you need to worry about that, but nonetheless. Density and height limitations, complies. Setbacks, this is where it doesn't comply. So they've quoted the planning scheme. This is a cut and paste of the planning scheme, repeated back to the planning scheme people. Seems a bit redundant, but never a bad idea to set it up. And the table from the planning scheme. And then they've got what the proposals are in comparison to what it ought to be.
Is that a good idea, doing a screenshot like that, so that all, that the ruling is actually there in
It
black
just
and white?
lets them know you know what it should be.
Yeah.
Also what you're looking at when you're referencing.
Yeah.
Then they
Yep.
can know if it's actually this.
Keep it
clause.
nice
Yeah,
and clear.
no, it's
Yeah.
not actually that part of the clause you want to look at. You omitted to look at this
Yeah.
part of the clause, and sometimes that feedback's really helpful
Yeah.
if they know what you've looked at.
And I don't know if you noticed, but on the site plan, the hatching you used for the construction showed that it was that blockwork hatch that I mentioned last week. So it will be okay as far as fire separation goes, even though we couldn't open the drawings that showed the elevation. So that 300 millimetre setback is what he's proposing instead of 1.5.
So a solid blockwork wall will meet the fire requirements, but it doesn't meet
I'm not
planning.
sure why he's written complies there, because it doesn't. And then private open space. So he's gone to a bit of trouble to explain it, and then there are a whole bunch of, when you submit a planning application, there, apart from the actual clauses in the planning scheme, there are a whole bunch of other Act regulations, so clauses from the Planning Act that you have to address. Things like if there's an interim development control order, which there typically isn't unless some other activity is happening at the planning scheme. Any environmental reports that are required, what the merits are of the project, the capability of the land to do the project, any public facilities or public open space, less of an issue. And these are the same points you have to address for every different type of application. So if it's not relevant to this property, which it's not because it's private, then you can just say that. Any public utilities and infrastructure that have been provided, any public facilities and public open space, the amenity of the project, anything to do with public interest and the Building Act compliance. So those are on a guide within this website. If I go back, yes, David?
$1,000, like, an average shelter.
Seems a little excessive, but it's probably got to do with the fire construction that they're going to have to use right up against that boundary, because that'll have to be solid concrete. Mm-hmm. 60 days or 600? That's definitely 600.
600.
Yeah, that seems a little excessive.
Probably.
What size
Ah,
shed is it?
I've seen some pretty,
Yeah, it could be
Expensive
fancy.
although it doesn't look,
Maybe like a single dwelling shed.
yeah, it's a single dwelling shed, like it's not like a warehouse.
No, no, open. Not to worry. So, very briefly back to this website. I'm just going to close that. So, you're welcome to fish around in there anytime you want.
Yep.
And archives are in there as well. So, there's concurrent proposed planning scheme amendments, any exceptional developments, and then by,
Region.
yeah, by building control area. And then there's archived as well, so you can have a bit of a look back in time. So the idea is you create this account and then go through the website like Sandra said. Just here on the right hand side is a general process There's a new one. Look at that. Oh, that looks familiar. They did put it back with a new banner.
Yeah.
Bless them. So last time I went in there, that wasn't there.
So we can't look in there unless we're registered.
No, you
You
can.
No, I didn't
anyone,
register for that.
anyone can look at the current applications. You can't lodge an application unless
There's
you're
no here
registered.
planning
But anyone
notices.
can register. It's free
Yeah.
to register.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See planning notices just up there? Yeah. So something that I want you to think about for homework in the next 6 minutes, I'm just going to tell you about this. One of the things that you have to do for your Class 1 and 10 project is compare our planning scheme with an alternative jurisdiction in Australia. The idea is that these skills ought to be portable, and having learned from experience that reading other planning schemes are very similar to ours, it's not too bad a project to be able to do. So I have a list of a whole bunch of different places in Australia that you might like to choose from, but there's nothing wrong with you choosing your own. I did a project for my dad who built a house in Queensland, so I had to look up the Redland City Council planning scheme. They have very similar setbacks in Queensland. They have extra requirements with regards to planting big trees and things like that. They needed to either keep or replace 10 medium to large trees on the site, which is unusual compared to Darwin, but other than that, it was very similar with regards to how they handled where people put their house, how big it could be, how many car parks they had to have, and all that sort of stuff. So one of the tasks in your assessment task sheet is to describe how these rules would apply for this project in an alternative jurisdiction. So your challenge this evening is to come up with a place that you might like to put this project, to see what the rules might like to be in that place. Don't pick anywhere where you think it's going to be impractical to put this kind of project. So I'm thinking, and I did have a student try Sydney CBD. It's such a massive planning scheme, it was too much. So try and pick something that's moderately resembling this regional nature, if you like. So regional Victoria, regional New South Wales, regional Queensland. Don't pick anything too regional because there are practically no planning scheme requirements out in the middle of, you know, King's Crossing
Broken
or wherever. And yeah. So don't go, you know, back of Burke, Western Australia or wherever that is. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that particular aspect? So just pick a place, and if you feel like doing a bit of a scope around to see what you can find, that'll be on the list of things to do for the project. Sweet. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, that's it for me for today.
What did you say, Kizzy?
Definitely look like them on computer things.
Yeah.
Any questions before we go? Nope.
Well done, everybody. That was a big day. I'd love to be able to say tomorrow will be easier.
That's a good stuff.